Welcome to the Date Forever podcast. Keep your relationship fueled up with strategies discovered by couples and experts. Because at Fuel Collective, we believe better relationships will equal a better world. You are about to discover specific insights and tools that cost little or nothing to implement to help you date forever. And now, here are your hosts, a couple who always have a half-packed suitcase and a date night in the calendar, Sammy and Nathan Yeager.
Welcome to the Date Forever podcast. Today we are chatting to Rachelle Glendon about what slow living is and how to implement some of its principles into our lives. We explore what the benefits are of slowing down and how to make the most out of our time once we are living slower. Now let's get into it.
Welcome to the Date Forever podcast, everyone. Today we are welcoming Rachelle Glendon. She is a coach and the host of How to Live Slow, a podcast designed to help women slow down, get unstuck, and show up for everything that matters to them. She is a wife, mum, and reformed overachiever who learned the long way that a fulfilling life isn't ticking off to-dos or reaching life milestones. So she created an online program called The Slow Life, a fast track to slowing down so that you can do less and live more. Welcome to the show, Rachelle.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to chat.
So to kick off, what is slow living?
So slow living is a philosophy that started in actually Italy, really started as a slow food movement, but it's basically just the opposite of this hustle culture that we're all in, like working towards big goals, but not actually enjoying the process of that working toward the goal. It really applies, particularly as you start to get older, you start to notice like all the things that don't actually matter that you thought mattered. So it's just slowing down.
So how did you come across this concept? Was there something within your life that kind of highlighted it to you and made you realize that you needed to change?
Yeah, definitely. So I got into slow living through working full-time and going to uni full-time. And then my husband and I met, we moved in together and we have all this stuff. So we, contributed 2 households worth of stuff together. And so we're like, hang on, we want to live a little bit more lightly, minimal living or minimalist living is kind of like where we started. So we decluttered a lot and then we're like, oh, you know what? This could actually apply to a lot of other things in our lives, not just the amount of stuff we have. But if we want to travel, we can live a little slower and have a little bit less pressure financially through having less, upgrading our car and upgrading where we live and keeping our house small so that we've got more flexibility and freedom. So when I finished uni, I realized actually it's really good having some spare time so you can just go with the flow and be a bit more spontaneous.
So it sounds like that it applies not just within the pace of life, but also within material things as well, yeah?
Yeah, definitely, yeah. Just disengaging from that keeping up with the Joneses feeling of ticking off those life, you've got to buy a car, go to uni, buy a house, go on a holiday, get married, have kids, tick, 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 tick. It's really about figuring out what you want and doing it in your order.
How do we do that?
That is the honestly the hard question, because we've been given so much, at school, in movies and shows and in the media and, from society at large. We're just exposed to the way that you do life. So it's really about understanding, okay, maybe that doesn't fit for me, or maybe I want to have kids later, or maybe I want to travel first, or, it's just about, slowing down in itself allows you to take the time to reflect on what you actually want and whether where you're headed is the direction that you want to be going. So It's kind of like a chicken and egg thing. You need to slow down to reflect, but to reflect, you need to slow down.
Yeah. So if we're thinking about this idea of, being really conscious with our time and, using it intentionally and doing things that we really want to do rather than, I guess, the default behaviors of running through life, Nathan and I at Fuel Collective talk a lot about, love life. And that really is about being intentional, and not YOLO, only live once kind of life, but being really conscious about how you spend, your time and your money and your energy. So once you made that shift from, I guess, a busy life to starting to slow down, what were some of the benefits that you started to experience?
Well, the first thing that happened was we were able to start our business and have less pressure financially of how much we needed to make fast so that we could continue to live. So we were able to have that time freedom and that flexibility. And then when kids came along, I was able to just work a couple of hours a day, a couple of times a week to maintain, to keep that business flowing. But then I didn't have to return to a full-time job or anything. We were able to, just live a little bit more according to our family values as well. And as a mum, like now that I'm a mum, being the kind of mum that I want to be and slowing down to my kids' pace, like kids live really in the present moment. So for me, being able to slow down and not rush them through the morning routine and get them out of the house. And, if they want to play, I can join in with them sometimes rather than constantly saying, I've got to do housework or this is more important, actually taking the time. Yeah.
Amazing. So, I've kind of heard this idea, and it's the first time I heard it, it was about money. And it's that you can either earn more or you can want less. And that's how you can have a much wealthier lifestyle. And I don't just mean in money, but, a really rich life and lifestyle. And I guess that's kind of the same thing with your life and your possessions and the way that you, I guess, fill your calendar. You can either achieve and do more or want less. Can you talk to us a little bit about how you and your husband got on the same page for, I guess, adopting this lifestyle?
Yeah, so for us, it was really about, we're on the same page of what our values are. So we know that family and quality time and experiences and travel and all of those things, they're all of our values. But I guess we also balance each other out. So my husband's very high energy. He's a very go-getter at work. He's quite motivated from a business perspective. And that's not to say that I'm not motivated, but it's kind of my job in our relationship to say, hang on a second, you're working too much, you're getting too caught up in that. We've agreed that these are our values. So let's take some time this weekend to spend quality time as a family and put the laptop away. But equally, he motivates me and says, we've got to get this stuff done or, so we balance each other out in that sense. Yeah.
So, I know, speaking personally, that I love the idea of having more white space in my calendar, but then things can just come up, whether or not it's like social events or business opportunities or networking things or family commitments and things. How do you get to a place where you know what you want to say no to?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So, when those things come up, it's like, what's that gut feeling? Is it like, I really want to do that? Or have I got FOMO about this? So am I going to say yes to this because I don't want to miss out, or I don't want to seem rude, or I'm people pleasing, or do I really want to do it? And then trust that first instinct. But the beautiful thing about creating more white space is that you have the ability to say yes to those opportunities that you really want to say yes to. So when you think about, I don't want to let people down, it's actually more about what can I say yes to so I can show up really well for that, rather than draining all your energy or using up all your capacity on things that actually aren't as important to you. And then when the good stuff comes up or the things you want to do, you either can't because you've overcommitted or pre-committed to something else so I think it's switching the mindset that you have around saying no to seeing it as an opportunity to say yes to the more important stuff.
I know for me, I had a big breakthrough around this maybe 3 or 4 years ago, where I realized that everybody around me was busy. And no matter who you asked, their response would be like, how are you? Oh yeah, I'm really busy. And it was just like a default reply. And I consciously made a decision that was no longer going to be my response, not like to how are you? It was going to be, oh, I'm really great and I've got this going on, not, oh, yeah, I'm flat out, or yeah, I'm really busy. And I think, I've heard it coined like that badge of busy, that badge of importance. I'm so busy and so important and so in demand that people get that, I guess, sense of significance from being so busy. So when they're not busy, it's like, oh, well, I'm not as important. How can we work through some of that mind game, inner sort of stuff to help us get to a place where we can live more slowly?
This is another great question. The idea of saying that you're busy, words create worlds, right? So when you say you're busy, that's what you are, whether you mean to say it or not, whether you mean to sound important or whether you mean it's just an automatic response. When you say you're busy, that's more of what you get. So when you are a bit more consciously aware of how you respond to that question. But I think there's so much to say about this because the other thing is I know when people say to me, oh, sorry, I haven't called you, or sorry, we haven't caught up because I've been busy. What they're saying is you haven't been a priority. So I try not to say that as well, just so that people don't think that I've been too busy to think about them. So there's that kind of angle to think about it from as well.
What language have you replaced that with?
Well, if somebody says, hey, what have you been up to? Like, I usually say, oh, I'm focusing on this, or I'm focusing on that. Or if I'm late for something or something like that, I like to say, instead of saying like, sorry, I'm late, I'll say, thanks for waiting. I mean, I know that's not the same, but that's another word that I've totally replaced, like saying sorry all the time, because that's another one that we automatically say. But yeah, busy it's just actually answering the question when someone says, how are you? Instead of just automatically saying busy, like say, oh, I'm great, thank you. Or, actually today's been a bit tough, or, being really vulnerable as well can really be useful, especially connecting with your loved ones.
So what were some of the first steps that you took, I guess, in trying to live a bit more slowly?
Well, again, talking about that being busy, I think it's really recognizing your importance and your own self-worth, and realizing that actually if you're really busy, that means you're not prioritizing yourself and your own needs. You find like if you're always saying yes to everything for other people, it's those little things like having the time of a Sunday afternoon to like prep for the week ahead, that we go, it's not in the diary. We just hope that we'll have the time. And that doesn't kind of show up. But if you make time for that, you're saying to yourself, I'm important enough for these things to be okay to schedule in. And also you're saying, like, I think people feel really guilty when someone says, hey, can you do this for me? And if there's nothing in the diary at that time, you feel guilty for saying I'm not available. So you have to have a reason. You have to have something else in the diary, right? So I think it's definitely learning to say, actually, I haven't got anything on, but I'm not actually available just because I haven't got anything on. So that's all that self-worth stuff to get started with, and learning about boundaries.
A couple of my big breakthroughs around this sort of stuff came from reading Sarah Knight's book, The Life-Changing Magic of Not Giving a Fuck. And I love this book. And if you're not a big reader, go watch her TED Talk. She's got a great, I think it's like 12 or 13 minutes, and it summarizes the core concept really well. But it really, I guess, sent home for me that we do only have a certain amount of time, money, and energy to spend. And if you say yes to things that you don't really want to do, there's a cost negative to that too. It's not just that you show up and do that thing, but what did you say no to? When you said yes to that thing, what did you inadvertently say no to? And using your Sunday afternoon, get ready for the week prep, you're saying no to, healthy food, or being prepared, or being organized, or having, 5 really seamless weeknight dinners because you said yes to going to that one thing. So I love that analogy. But something that I guess I learned from that process is that why was I saying yes to things? Like examining that. And it was, that idea that if there is white space, you don't have to fill it. And it's totally okay that something comes up that you don't really want to go to, and just because you're available doesn't really mean that you're available. And it sounds so rudimental, it sounds so basic, right? But it's a big gear shift, to change and go, I'm not going to explain, no, I can't come because I want to sit on my couch and watch Netflix because I've had 7 continuous nights out this last week or so, and I just need to say no. We don't say that, do we? Like we say, oh, no, I can't make it, and then insert other thing that you're doing, rather than just saying, oh, I'm really sorry, I can't make it, have fun.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's definitely a lot of people pleasing. I think that all those social stories that we get about like what makes a good person, or, I don't know, particularly women are really bad at people pleasing, I think. And we're taught to be good girls and to not let people down. And I would love to know what the example, the similar thing that guys get, because I'm sure they get, I don't know, Nathan, you might know. But
I think I'm just as bad for people pleasing. I'm probably worse at people pleasing than you are. So I think it works.
It's probably because I read that book and was like, no more. I'm saying no to stuff.
Yeah, actually, to be honest, my husband can't say no to people. He really struggles. Like, especially at work, if something goes wrong, he's all responsibility and will fix it even if he doesn't need to.
Yeah.
Hey, so I want to go back to something that we were talking about just before. I came across this article not too long ago, which was talking about the depression rates in men over their retiree age. And basically what was happening, or, someone will have to fact check this, but what's happening is that they're leaving their workplaces and they're leaving that busy culture and they step into, nothingness, and they haven't got overly developed social networks or friend or family networks because they've spent their whole career being busy. And then all of a sudden they're just, open with all this free white space, and they actually don't know what to do with it, because it's like, you've got to stop and prop and go, well, if I had nothing to do, what would I like to do? It's a really big question.
It is, yeah. And I think that comes to a sense of purpose. And again, I think to me it highlights the fact that you have to have an identity outside of what you do for work. And, you have to take the time to foster those relationships outside of work and to be an engaged member of the community, so that work isn't the only way that you get self-worth, because what you do is not as important as who you are. And yeah, so I would say that that's probably plays a big role in that happening.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've got a few friends that I observe, the way that they do life. Not, there's no right or wrong, but I just watch them go from, social activity to social activity to social activity to social activity. And that's just Saturday. And I go, well, what are you actually avoiding? Like, by committing to all of these things and rushing around, like, it means that there's not ever an opportunity to be present at that moment, because you're busy rushing to the next one. But I guess it does bring that, that question is like, well, are you just avoiding sitting in your own company? Is that what's going on there? How can we sort of unpack some of that stuff?
Yeah, that sense of like, what will I do if I've got nothing to do?
Yeah.
Yeah. And exactly, you're so right. That's such a good question of like, well, what are you avoiding? Because a lot of us carry like so much, a variety of things like childhood experiences, or where we start to dissociate a little bit from the present moment because it's really uncomfortable, because then we have to face up to the things that we either aren't doing that we want to be doing, or the fact that we think we're not good enough to be doing those things, or that having nothing to do, what does that say about us? There's so much going on there. I definitely know for me, slow living and slowing down, and it brought up a few painful things that I definitely needed to deal with and I was avoiding dealing with. And I think that that's probably one reason why people stay so busy, because they know that,
it's a distraction essentially.
Exactly, yeah. And but it catches up with you, I think, in other ways.
So once we've started identifying what we want to say yes to, and therefore what we want to say no to, and we've started to slow down a little bit, I've heard you talk a little bit about this idea of creating time for quality time. How do you then, I guess, stop from filling that white space with unquality, or whatever the opposite of quality is? Junk time. How do you, how do you go, okay, cool, I've created this Sunday afternoon. How do you then actually make that quality time and not park my ass in front of the TV or the couch or on social media or whatever the numbing behavior is? How do we make that white space really quality?
To me, I instantly think about my concept of real self-care. Well, to me, real self-care is all the stuff that we do to make ourselves feel better. Rather than, if you think about self-care, it's like consumer self-care, the stuff that you think about, like have a bubble bath, eat some chocolate, get a massage, all of that, which is, it's all great to do. It's really lovely. But then real self-care is like, getting on top of your finances, making sure you have a nice routine of exercise and a rest practice and meditation or journaling or whatever you need, making sure you maintain your relationships, like using that time. It is actually really easy to hop on the FOMO schedule of like scrolling through social media and wasting time that way. But that doesn't make you feel good. So, being really committed to doing the things that make you feel good.
Yeah, I had a mentor of mine a few years ago. We went through an exercise where we did a happy list or a joy list, and to come up with 100 things that, really do bring you joy, and some, categorizing them into like low cost and sort of higher cost things. And then just, when you're a bit stuck, go, oh, what is that one thing? And it's like, oh yeah, I do actually really love going to a new cafe to have a to have a coffee and sit there and enjoy a new environment and a new space. Very low cost exercise, but it's something that you can actively do to take yourself out to enjoy more quality time than, scrolling the gram.
Yeah, absolutely. A list of ideas for when you get really stuck is such an obvious, easy answer. It's so good.
Yeah. So what I'd love to know is, you touched on it a little bit earlier, that you've got your beautiful husband and some kiddos. But what has the impact of slow living had on your relationship, your romantic relationship?
Well, I don't think that we would still have a relationship if we didn't do slow living, because it really is about prioritizing each other and prioritizing what we value as a family and making sure we do those things. So for us, we love to go on family holidays, but also equally, like I said before, like my husband's can be a bit of a workaholic, and if I wasn't aware of that, I'd probably, like, if I wasn't a slow living advocate, I probably wouldn't be aware that that was what was going on, and I'd maybe take it personally or think like, he's, working all the time, maybe he doesn't love me, or, get caught up in all the reasons why it's about me, and it's never about you, but it's about communicating. So having the time to communicate again and spending that quality time together.
It's kind of amazing that you can, cohabitate with another human being and you're both busy doing your lives and exercising and running your own career or business or that sort of part of your life, and then any extracurricular activities, and then your friends and your own family, and then all of a sudden it's like, I feel like I've hardly seen you. Like, where have you been, or where have I been? And I
guess that's also through a lack of quality time as opposed to just time together, because often when you are together, you're just so tired that all you want to do is sit in front of the couch and watch TV and not actually connect with each other.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that's right. When you're saying yes to everything and everyone else, by default, you're deprioritizing not only yourself, but your relationship.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so that white space at home can be that spare time for each other.
Yeah, that's a big part of, I guess, the Date Forever podcast, and the conversation that we're looking to have is like, how can we actively date ourselves and make time for ourselves, but also our partner, our chosen person, that we do actively prioritize them, and we want to refuel those relationships ongoing, always, and that it's not something that slips further and further and further and further and further down the priorities list when we're busy saying yes to everything but our core relationships.
Yeah. And it's really easy to do. I found our biggest struggle time was when we had the kids, because I had pretty severe separation anxiety from the kids, not them, me. So it was really hard for us to have quality time alone without the kids around, to go on dates and things. Like, I think actually my youngest one's only 2.5. We've only left the house at nighttime twice without him. So we're very bad at it. But also equally, we have a lot of time, like we both work from home. And so we have little moments throughout the day. Our whole life is quality time in one sense. We are lucky that way.
Yeah, I'd love to know. So if date nights is not your thing, what else do you do to keep your relationship fueled up?
Well, for us, because we are together so much, it is actually about figuring out how to spend time on our own. Like, he plays golf and plays soccer, and I like to go to the gym and walk through the forest and things. So and making sure that we don't get into a bit of a funk of not seeing our friends and socializing. Like, we can get really, we're homebodies, so it's really easy for us to stay home. So we make sure that we get out and about and get social with friends and have a good time that way together as well. Like, all of the kids get together and we can all have adult conversations. Yeah.
So I guess if we're looking within our own lives to slow down a little bit, what would be your, I guess, number one top tip to kick off that journey?
I would say my first pillar of slow living is to do less. Yeah. So there's a lot that goes on there, and to do less, you need to know what your priorities are so that you can focus your time and energy on those things. You need to learn, like, to say no, like we've talked about a lot, and have some boundaries around that. And I guess you need to really work on your self-worth, like we've said before, to understand that, particularly in the family dynamic, that it doesn't all have to fall on you. My main clients are mums who really struggle with sharing that mental load. But the mental load of like family life can get really heavy. So learning how to be okay with not being the one that has to do everything and getting support and help, which is something we can all learn to do regardless, I think. Learning to ask for help is actually a really big part of slowing down because, we take on so much responsibility and feel like it all has to fall on us. So,
yeah, I think that's really interesting what you just shared there, because I recall having a conversation with a girlfriend of mine, and she was in the middle of transitioning. She was interviewing for a new role. It was something that she was really, pumped and excited about. She had separated from her partner, within the last year, and she's still sort of finding her feet, living on her own, and shipping the kids back and forth. And she said to me one day, she's like, oh, this morning I noticed that there's some dust in my walk-in wardrobe, and I really should get to that. Like, and every time I see it, I feel like I'm failing. And it hit me, and I was like, wow, her standard for the way that she wants to do life is so hard on herself, and it's disproportionate. Like, literally nobody else is going to see that dust, and it's not going to break anything if she leaves it for another week, leaves it for 2 weeks, leaves it for another month. It's honestly not a big problem, but it made me stop and prop and reflect and go, oh, she's being so hard on herself for her output and the way that she's showing up in her own life, even when it's not visible to others. And it made me really reconsider what I was doing for my standards and whether or not I was being too hard on myself for, the various bits of things. Like, for me, doing laundry, bottom of the list. Like, I hate it. It's not a big deal. If I end up wearing clothes that are unfolded and still wrinkly, that's, not a big problem. But I know that if I was pushing myself to hold a standard that didn't come naturally, like, that wouldn't be a very happy place for me or probably Nathan to be in.
No, yeah, absolutely. Oh, life is more than housework.
Yeah.
And if you're really being conscious about how you want to spend your time, is that at the top of it?
Yeah, I think most of us would say no, whether we have kids or whether we still live at home or who knows, but yeah.
Yeah. So I have one sort of last question. You talked a little bit about the disparity between, I guess, slow living coming naturally to you versus your husband. How can we get on the same page and I guess stay there? Is there a practical or tactical tip that we can do? Is it about having a shared calendar ecosystem, or how do we do that?
It's communication. I think everything in relationships always comes back to communication and just checking in. And, well, we do have a shared calendar actually. And we have an unspoken agreement that we don't put anything in the diary that's going to take up family time. So, like during the day of a weekday, you can do whatever you like. But if it's going to influence or impact family time, which is mornings, nights, and weekends, then we have a discussion about it.
Mm-hmm.
But we always are communicating around, you're working a lot lately, or which is a very regular conversation in our house. So what happens when you have a business, I think, and particularly when you work from the kitchen table a lot, you guys probably know that it's very hard to step away. So also to say that, it doesn't have to always just be set in stone. So you can change it. So you might agree that one way will work, and then again comes back to communication. So, okay, suddenly this isn't working for us anymore, so we need to change the rules of how we're going to do this or change what we agree on. Over time, things always evolve. So
yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. So we talked a little bit about, dating forever and actively choosing, to spend time with yourself and with your chosen someone. And we talked a little bit about loving life and really being intentional with how we spend that time. Another one of our core values is to be the change. And that's about taking accountability for what you have influence over in your own life, but also the change that you want to see in the world. So to say thank you for joining us today, we've made a contribution to Role Foundation in Indonesia. And what they do is they try and help reduce waste in landfills. So a lot of the waste that occurs in Indonesia is from tourism, where people have gone into hotels and they've hardly used items, but they're no longer fit for reuse within that commercial sense. So Role Foundation take some of those items, re-sanitize them, and then distribute them to orphanages rather than them going to landfill. So you talked a little bit about minimalism and consuming less. So we thought that might be a good fit for you.
That is amazing. Thank you so much. That sounds like an incredible organisation.
Yeah, we've done that via our partnership with Buy One, Give One. So thank you so much for making that possible.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for having me.
No worries. So, Rachelle, if people want to connect with you and want to learn a little bit more about slow living, how should they do that?
Yeah, so my website is www.howtoliveslow.com. I'm also on Facebook. You search How to Live Slow and I'll come up. And Instagram, it's at How to Live Slow as well.
Perfect.
Awesome.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's been a really lovely chat.
Thanks heaps for joining us. If you love what we're doing here and want more, subscribe to the Date Forever podcast to make sure you never miss an ep. Come and hang out with us and other awesome couples who are fueling up their relationships in the Thriving Couples Collective Facebook group, or check us out at fuelcollective.com.au. Until next time, keep on dating, because better relationships equal a better world.